Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this lunchtime's session looking at the recent local transport note on bus user priority. We are recording this and we'll make the recording available in the next couple of days along with the slides. So you can share it with colleagues that couldn't be here, or you can review it if you need to. Please do feel free to use the chat function, and we'll have opportunity for questions and discussion towards the end. So, to start with, we will just have a bit of a step back in history, all the way back to 1997 to the local transport note number 1, which was all about keeping buses moving. And that was the first time that there had been any formal Department of Transport guidance on how to use traffic management to assist buses. Before that, of course, people were doing it, but there wasn't any formal guidance note from the department to try and standardise things. That was then followed by a couple of traffic advisory leaflets in 2001 and 2003. So the newest note that the department has issued about bus priority is 21 years ago. So these things don't come around very often. The 2001 and 2003 leaflets were the first time that really there'd been any form of concept that public transport priority should be put in place to improve journey times and service reliability. The previous guide, which is thicker than the leaflets from 1997, was much more about the technical. If you do a bus lane, this is the signage you need and things like this. And the 2001 guide was the first time there'd been anything about more than just using physical infrastructure. Really, it was the first time that there was guidance around using selective vehicle detection of some sort, which back then was loops with specific tags being put on buses and things like that. So we leap forward 21 years, and March, right at the end of March, along with a flurry of other documents, the Department of Transport issued Local Transport Note 1 for 2024, and is all about bus user priority. So the first thing to notice is a significant change in approach from the title. It's all about bus users rather than public transport. So it's about the people that use it rather than necessarily the vehicles. So it takes a very different view of what to do and who the key focus should be on. It does consider the plan for drivers from October 2023. The original drafts of this were kicking around before last summer, but with the advent of the plan for drivers, things had to be reviewed in light of that focus, which is why it got published in March rather than last summer. So the guidance does deliver on the plan for driver commitment to strengthen the guidance to make sure bus lanes help rather than hinder traffic as a general principle, along with other forms of priority. So it does take into account that wider road use element. It also takes a good steer towards the 2024 BSIP guidance, which is something we've looked at in a couple of sessions recently, and that basic guidance covers some requirements and expectations in a bit more detail than's available in the local transport note, which is interesting that it references a specific, effectively project and funding stream set of guidance. The work to produce this was done by Arup and AECOM on behalf of the Department of Transport, and so it took quite a wide steering group and set of inputs from people, including ourselves at ARTIG, who were on the steering group along with a couple of members. So what does it cover? So it really redefines the approach to priority for buses, because it takes into account a number of different factors and features that the previous guidance didn't, because the focus is very much on bus users rather than buses. And so it looks to the experience that the passenger will receive rather than just the physical elements of it. So making sure that people have a fast and hopefully delay-free journey time, managing consistent journey time, something that the basic guidance looks to quite a lot. The aim of all of this, of course, is to increase patronage, but it also tries to make sure that buses can be an attractive and accessible choice for passengers, and we'll come on to see why it thinks it can do that, rather than just focusing on journey times and things like that. Because of the focus on the driver stuff from last autumn from the government, it does cover the fact that actually priority and preference on the road across against other modes, so against cars, for example, or walking and cycling, should only be provided where it's appropriate. There are times when it's not appropriate. It sets out 6 design principles at the core, which everything is supposed to fit around and support. So the first is one where it shows that actually the focus of this is about the bus user. So enabling and supporting passengers to get to the bus stop, making sure they can walk or wheel to and from the stop safely and easily. They can cross the road easily and safely, for example, and access routes should be as inclusive as possible to facilitate access by different users. So a nod to accessibility in the wider sense, and the whole sort of getting to the bus stop experience. Bus stops should be safe and comfortable, as well as being accessible, and provide a safe location from a road safety point of view and personal safety perspective. And so we'll pick up on some of the things about making sure, you know, greenery is trimmed back and things like that. And there should be space available for passengers to wait. Curbside arrangements should be in place and enable the bus to stop safely, aligned with the curb, with appropriate step heights and things like that, bearing in mind wheelchair needs and other mobility aids. Buses should be able to re-enter the traffic stream with minimal delay by making sure that you've got vehicle priority through markings on the road and appropriate use of different types of bus stops. The passengers, while they're waiting, should be protected from the elements through seating, shelters where appropriate, and information to reduce journey uncertainty. Then we start to get into some of the vehicle elements, so minimizing interruptions and delays along the route to support priority by reducing interactions with other vehicles or features along the route to help provide free flow movement. And that means identifying things that could hold up the bus and seek to address or minimise the likely delay. Again, things that the BSIP guidance has some more specific stuff in. Then while it's en route, give the bus vehicle priority. Where other measures are unable to eliminate or reduce it, then that's when you get to the point where you give buses specific priority and preferential treatment, but otherwise you should try and do it through other means. Support reliability, so because passengers rely on a timetable, and if you say you're going to arrive at a stop at a particular time and it's going to take so long to get to the destination, how do you adhere to that as best as possible to provide confidence on the service? And then providing accessible information. So whilst this is about bus user priority and helping passengers get from to where they need to be on time reliably, it also looks to that confidence element of a passenger's journey by providing information, making sure it's accessible as possible, suggesting the use of audio and visual information and real-time service updates and things like that. So the document takes those 6 design principles and tries to apply them to the different stages of bus users' journey. It recognises when you're planning and designing priority the roles of different organisations, particularly public sector, because this is because it's a transport note very much focused on things that authorities and the public sector in the wider sense can do. So it looks at what central government can do. So things like this document, BSIP, funding and support and that sort of thing. Local transport authorities, what they can do through applying for BSIP and managing enhanced partnerships and doing network analysis and things like that that are required in EPs and BSIPs. And then the group of authorities that are often forgotten about, because if you're in a Met area, you look to the combined authority for a lot of public transport stuff, but actually when it comes to what happens on the ground on the road is actually the local transport authority, traffic authority. I'm falling into the trap there. It's the traffic authority, which in the case of a combined authority area will be the district council. So what role can they play? How should you get them involved if you're looking at providing priority for users and vehicles? It then tries and gets you to think about the different approaches that you might take in 4 core scenarios that you might have. So one is you've got an existing bus route and you've identified it's got some problems and needs some improvement because of performance issues, for example. So what are the scenarios, what do you do there? What are the steps necessary there? You've got a corridor or a section of road that you've got a problem on. So rather than just looking at it from a route-centric point of view, look at it from a road-centric point of view. And if you're doing things, how do you make sure that what you do to support other modes, particularly walking and cycling, making sure that it's mode agnostic so that you're not causing an impact on buses. What do you do if you've got a brand new bus route? How do you go about working out whether you need to do anything on that? And if you've got shiny new, housing estate or industrial park, that sort of thing, how do you go about making sure that the development is considering buses and making sure that they're not impaired and have problems because of road layouts and things like that. There's quite heavy reference in this bit to existing work. So, for example, the Stagecoach Bus Service and New Residential Development Guide gets a reference, and you can see where they've been using that rather good document as the transport note's been produced, and the more recent CIHT buses in urban development work, which rather than being quite focused on residential requirements, looks to city centre planning and industrial development. So leaning on work that's already been well regarded and got a good reputation, so that's always positive. And then it lays out the steps that you would take to go from planning to delivery, and where different organisations need to be involved. But if you've been involved in doing public transport planning and road design and bus priority for more than probably a couple of months, you should be doing this sort of thing anyway. So this isn't rocket science, what it's trying to tell you. And that goes for an awful lot of the stuff that's in there. This is borrowing from good practice from all sorts of places and trying to bring it together largely into the one place, rather than doing anything particularly new. So, for example, when you're planning and designing something, you should be engaging with stakeholders and user groups and things like that, which you will all do because you're obliged to. And so, it talks about how to do accessible and inclusive engagement, what stakeholders you should be consulting when it comes to user priority and that sort of thing, and borrows quite a lot from the CPT toolkit. And then, of course, monitor what's going on, because that's one of the key tenets of the focus on the driver. You need to monitor what else is going on the road network, and if what you're doing for public transport's detrimental, then you need to think about actually how you reduce that impact on other road users as well. Something that some in the public transport community might think you shouldn't be doing because buses need priority, but that's one of the requirements and expectations. So it then, having looked at the planning and design side of things, looks at the different measures and techniques that you can use to provide bus user priority. Again, common theme, it uses things that have been widely circulated before, and it's all about bringing this sort of thing together. So the now quite famous and well used Transport Focus 2020 survey on passenger experience, we've used it on a number of occasions in RTIG, CPT have, other organisations have. So hopefully it's no surprise in there. So understand the user journey, understand what passengers' priorities are, and work out how you can deliver those. So it's things in this regard, it's things like more buses on time at stop, more bus journeys on time, faster journey times, that sort of thing. So things that hopefully you've well understood already. If you've not looked at the 2020 survey for a while, it is always worth bringing it out and thinking about what you're doing in relation to it, because it's so useful in so many ways. It then looks at why you need to focus on journey time and reliability from a user point of view, and there's some useful high-level analysis of actually what affects buses and what the different components are of a journey time, and highlights the fact that actually nearly a quarter of the time a bus is on its journey, it's spent pulling into or pulling out of or stationary at bus stops, and so a significant portion of time. And so that's one of the reasons why there's quite a lot of focus on things other than how do we make the traffic light turn green when a bus is approaching, because actually more of the time is spent around bus stops than it is waiting at traffic signals and things like that. So actually, is there the most benefit to be done by focusing on the bus stop and the design of that rather than other things? It's got some really useful guidance on passenger access. So how does somebody actually get to the bus stop? So things like passenger crossing points. If you're going to do something, if you're going to drop curbs and put, those bits in the middle of the road where you stand if you can't get all the way across. The name escapes me at the moment. If you're going to do things like that, hard measures, then position them upstream of bus stops so people aren't encouraged to cross in front of the bus, which not only means that they're more likely to get into some form of road traffic collision because they haven't got clear vision of what's coming around the bus. They're also delaying the bus because the bus can't go until they've moved, of course. So think about how to encourage people to cross behind the bus, where sight lines are going to be better and things like that. Putting in place the right things. So yes, put in place a drop curb, but also make sure it's got the right tactile paving for accessibility. Make sure that around the bus stop where people will be going to it and waiting, the maintenance is done to the hedges and trees and things like that, so that you're not squashed up against the roadside. Making sure that the width of the pavement is right so that you can get a wheelchair on and people walking past and things like that. Make sure that surfaces are good. So very much highways and pedestrian access type stuff, but really important to encourage people to use public transport and stop some of the you might think a couple of seconds here or think that sort of thing delay as a driver waits for somebody to cross the road in front of the bus, but all of these things add up. Then safety stuff, making sure that street lighting's good around bus stops, make sure that drainage is good, so make sure that there's no puddles around bus stops so you don't get splashed while you're waiting. All things that, if you think about it, are good and sensible things to do. And so hopefully encouraging people to actually think a bit more about this when they're looking at designing things. Then, excuse me, it looks at all of the sort of different things you might be doing to help priority for users and vehicles. So hard measures, so direct priority, things like bus lanes and bus gates, those sort of built things. Then more indirect things, so waiting restrictions, clear routes, and doing things like traffic signal priority. So less hard on the ground, bricks and mortar stuff, more, painting on the road and digital things. And then complementary measures. So things like enforcement or routine maintenance, making sure the trees are trimmed back so you've got good lines of sight, and where you've got parking problems, doing enforcement. And so it categorizes all of those and helps point you to where in the document you can find a bit more information if you need it. And quite rightly points out that the context of a particular bus route or stop or whatever it is you're doing is very context dependent. What you do on a highly trafficked high street could be quite different to a dual carriageway, for example. It then looks at bus stop facilities, borrowing from the Transport for London bus stop accessibility guidance. So how do you go about designing a good bus stop? And as well as the TfL work, it makes significant reference to the inclusive mobility guide that the DFT published a couple of years ago, which is a really good bit of work if you've not looked at it. But it looks at everything from shelter design, how do you make it accessible and friendly, to the location and spacing of stops. So make sure you've got good line of sight, not only for passengers but also a bus driver, so they can see whether somebody's there at the stop, because if they don't need to slow down because there's nobody wanting to board or alight, then they can maintain a better road speed. Don't put stops too close together, because again, it's the stop start that means that a long period of time is stop, is around that bus stop. Curb height, if you've got the curb height right, so you can put a ramp down more easily, then you save seconds, which all adds up. How to deal with things like cycling, and where you've got cycle lanes, or on a route where you've got a lot of cyclists, even if you haven't got a cycle lane, how do you make sure that you haven't got conflict there? It, for the first time, it really references traffic signals and what you might do there, as well as things like stop capacity, making sure you've got enough space, and what you might do at multimodal points with mobility hubs and things like that, where you've got a rail station or park and ride, or you've got a car club type arrangement. Then starting to get onto the things that you might have thought would be in here, and certainly were in the previous ones from 20 years ago. So priority lanes, how they should be designed, and with the plan for drivers, it very much borrows on the requirements for that. So make sure bus lanes help rather than hinder traffic. There's no point having a bus lane if you don't have a traffic problem, because a bus lane works really well where there's a lot of congestion and other vehicles are all clogged up, and you can actually do something meaningful. But if you haven't got long tailbacks at junctions and things like that along stretches of road, then actually is a bus lane the right thing to be doing? Putting in place bus lanes that only operate when you've got congestion, for example, morning and afternoon peaks, that sort of thing. What you might do about other vehicles, and dealing with those, do you put lanes in that you can allow taxis and cycles and other vehicles like that. What's to do about waiting and loading, how big they should be, and really importantly, the signage, something that seems to have been slipping in a lot of authorities recently. Apologies to those of you that are from authorities. There's an awful lot of things in the press about these bus lane fines having to be refunded because the signage is wrong and things like that. So making sure that that is clear what's necessary, and so you don't have to have those problems. Then hard access measures, so things like bus-only streets, what to do about one-way roads and things like that, what you can do about bus gates, and again, signage, making sure you do it right. Then curbside controls, so less hard measures. What do you do about where you've got parking problems causing delays and things like that? So think about no waiting zones, no loading, put in place loading bays, for example. And if you're a Met authority and can get the powers to do red routes, think about red routes. So think about the curb and what's delaying buses. And are there other ways of doing things other than, oh, we need to put in a bus lane? Actually, can you put in place other measures that will solve the problem before you get to the point of putting in place something that might be controversial, might cost an awful lot of money? So, can you get better bang for your bucks with other things? And then some of the things that, again, you might expect. So if you've got junctions that aren't signalised, how do you give priority at them? So things like stopping left or right turning other than for buses, how you might design and amend roundabouts. Yeah, you might go as far as Transport for West Midlands have been able to do with a roundabout, putting a lane straight through the middle of it for buses. But more practically, it might be putting in place a short section of bus lane in the last few meters to help a bus get round a particular roundabout more quickly. It might be a bit of a slip road if it's a larger space you've got and things like that. And then the bit that you're all waiting for, half a dozen pages out of 105 or 6, I think it is, on traffic signal priority. So what technologies you might think about applying. So selective vehicle detection, so things like loops in the road. If you've got a microwave sensor that can detect a large vehicle and therefore give priority out the signal, and the sort of things that we've done quite a lot of work on, using automatic vehicle location to detect where a bus is and do something specific based on that, and descriptions of basic local control. So where you might have, for example, a junction that isn't connected to a wider traffic control system, where you might put in place something like Mover, which manages queues and detects specific vehicle types to give them some form of priority at an isolated junction. Or if you've got a network of junctions that you can manage centrally through a urban traffic control centre, how do you do network adaptive control? So using things like Scoot to take feeds of where vehicles are and help them get green waves through networks. We've done quite a lot on that over the last 3 or 4 years, so we've got plenty of content on how to do that. and that in part is why this transport note hasn't got that much on it, because you could write 100 pages on traffic signal priority on its own, which is just, you know, one of the things that you can do to give buses and passengers priority across a network. And then really useful reminder that, you know, it's all very well doing all of these things and giving some form of priority, but actually you need to maintain it and monitor it. It unfortunately is a little bit focused on technology, this section, because it's all about, you know, reviewing technology, making sure it's maintained, and tweaking it. You know, personally, I think you need to do the same, whether you're doing something digitally or whether you've got painted bus lane on the road, or you know, a particular segregated bit of road. You need to review whether it's working and tweak it over time, because traffic changes. So a little bit of a shame there, but the principle of keeping things maintained and monitored is really good to see. Then section on other complementary measures, things that you might do. So enforcement, already touched on, making sure that the measures that you do put in place are enforced. So, you know, if you have done a no turn junction, making sure people are following that, making sure parking rules are being followed and things like that. How to handle by mode bits of road, so car and bus and bikes and taxis and things like that, and segregation, so, you know, guided busways, dedicated roads and things like that. Probably the most expensive way to do any form of priority, but really effective when it's done right. And then traffic regulation orders. So these are the things that dictate what you can and can't do on a road. And if you want to turn a road one way or bus only, then you have to put in place a traffic regulation order. Over the last few years, it's become easier to do experimental ones as part of low traffic neighbourhood guidance and rules. So, you know, you try something, you review it and you monitor it, and if it's not working, you undo it. So how do you do those, and reminding people that those exist. Interestingly, those have historically been paper-based, which means that autonomous vehicles and sat-navs and things like that don't always know about them. There is a project that's just been opened up to look at how you make traffic regulation orders digital in a practical sense. The standards for them have been agreed and things like that, but the Transport Technology Forum have just opened up a working group to look at that. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, then it's get in contact with TTF or let me know, and I'll sort you out with getting involved in that, because that's going to be quite an important thing going forward, making sure that bus priority stuff is properly coded in regulation orders, so that vehicles know what they're doing. So that has been a run through of what's in the local transport note. To sort of try and summarize what it says, you know, it's a much wider view of service reliability and journey times for buses and bus users than we've had before, which is good to see. It does, you know, go through some useful, rememberable things about how to develop schemes, which previously have been in a number of different places. So, you know, that's quite good. and gives you a quick idea of a lot of the different measures and techniques you might use. Not exclusive, but most things are there, and hopefully, it'll prompt you to think about the different options that you've got before you get to doing something either hard on the ground with shovels or some form of digital priority. It is a bit of a shame that that sort of content around traffic light priority is a bit limited, but I can see why they've done it. It's quite focused on two types of technology, but we've got a lot of specialist content which you can lean on, and we know that authorities and suppliers do. Suppliers of UTC systems, things like that, rely on it quite heavily. So that's no bad thing for ARTIG, but it does mean people don't necessarily get quite the full weight of what you can do in this document. But it is probably the area that changes the most. So if we get a local transport note on bus user priority once every 21 or nearly 30 years for the first one, then that's maybe that's right. It'll stand the test of time a bit better. Hopefully there'll be an update to it before 20 years time, but we won't have one for the next few years at least. So we've make best use of what we've got here. So it's a useful guide. There's a lot of stuff in there. It is very focused on the bus user perspective of things, which is probably the right thing to be doing, because that helps focus the attention on the passenger and the impact that what you do has on the passenger, rather than, hey, we just need to do some form of bus priority. Think about everything that you might be able to do. So no, it's overall, I think it's quite a useful document. Hopefully that's been useful for you. Has anybody got any questions? Because I've done enough talking, I think.
Hello, Tim.
Hi, Keith.
So I can't put my hand up because I'm driving. So apologies for the noise and if I'm shouting, because I can't really tell. But you talked about accessibility, you talked about audio. When I read the document, I've not got it in front of me. It obviously supports audio at bus stops, and it also recommends the use of a fob to trigger that audio. In the same token that the inclusive mobility guidance recommends a fob or an app to trigger audio. And to me, that just reinforces the fact that a push button doesn't make audio accessible for everybody, basically, and the need to provide options. And then obviously selling myself, the rack system supports all three options, being a push button, fob, and a phone app to make this displays audibly accessible. And that's me done, Tim, because I've got to concentrate on my driving.
Yeah, okay. So yes, thank you, Keith. The information at stops is a very little bit of the document. So yeah, Dave.
Yeah, hi. More a bit of serendipity, really, and possibly a link up. There were a couple of us on this call who were also on a call this morning with NAPTAN, Dr. Jay Harrison, who's looking at how they can represent accessibility within NAPTAN with some new fields. So it might be a useful link up there, just to be aware of that, and that as part of trying to make the bus stops more accessible, we also want to let people know how accessible they are. And there'll be some opportunity to do that within NAPTAN going forward.
Yeah, no, thank you, Dave. That is very interesting, link between what they're trying to do with NAPTAN and stop accessibility and user priority, help people to get to public transport. So yeah, no, thank you. Ian.
Yeah, afternoon, Tim. Yeah, it's following on from what Dave was saying. We were on this NAPTAN call. But if my memory's serving me right, going back a number of years, remember when they first went out that became this BODS thing, didn't they do an accessibility consultation at the same time? And there was going to be a requirement of local authorities to include accessibility information within NatTran, but it never went anywhere. Because I know the software that we had then, if you remember Paul Houghton, you had the option to put in elements of the bus stop infrastructure. And the stuff we use now, there is the opportunity to add assets. So whilst I was on the Dr. J stuff, I thought this was going to come in anyway and mandatory, and we weren't using some sort of AI to generate this information. Or am I skipping a bit somewhere?
When the 2017 Act was a bill and there was consultations, there were two consultations, one which was about open data, which led to BODs. And I think you're right, Ian, there was a question about accessibility in that. It's a long time ago though, so I'd have to have a relook at that to work out actually what was asked. So there was that, and yeah, there was at least one question around that. But at that same time, as well as the open data, there was an accessible information server consultation, which actually was about the on-vehicle audio-visual requirement, which is now the accessible information regulations, which were the statutory instrument for that was laid last year, and so that's what's leading to everybody putting displays and audio equipment on vehicles. So that wasn't specifically about at stop. That was about on vehicle. The next target really for the user groups, the accessibility user groups, so guide dogs and RNID, is now that they've got vehicles sorted in inverted commas, even though, you know, it'll take a few years for that to flow through to all of the vehicles. Their focus is on street and what's to do about improving the disability access, both physical and to information on street. So, you know, audio announcements for displays, things like making sure that the size of font for timetables is right and things like that. So they are starting to wind politicians up and wind up their PR campaigns for on-street accessibility. And so, you know, give it 2-3 years, depends on how the next government reacts to that, the timescales. I would expect there to be some form of regulation about on-street stuff within the next sort of 5 years or so, certainly.
Okay.
And if they include that within NatTan, then the current legislation means you have to do it. But if it's outside of NatTan, they'll have to go through more legislation, wouldn't they, Tim? Because they say that authorities got to do NatTan, but they don't define what is in it, so to speak, or a schema. So if they add it to NatTan, is it automatically in legislation?
Yeah, I don't know. I suspect if they were going to do something that extends the current requirements in NatTan, they would need to do something in some form of statutory instrument. It would be secondary legislation though, so actually it's not that hard. It doesn't need much parliamentary time, probably a day in the House and 2 or 3 days of committee time, so you can get that fairly easily normally. But you know, that would still be, you know, a couple of years away probably. Okay. Any more questions? I mean, if you think of more, you know how to get hold of us. So do feel free to drop us a line. having been talking about accessible stuff, we've got series of events during May on the accessible information regulations and the support grant that we've got. If you work or talk to small operators, then please do point them in the direction of the RTIG pages around the regulation and the grant, because we do have money that we have to give away. A bit of an unusual situation, but we need to give this money away. The department wants us to give the money away. Getting hold of small operators and getting them to pay attention to it is the big problem. So if you deal with small operators, then please encourage them to have a look and apply. As I say, we've got multiple events during May on that. And our next face-to-face event is on the 13th of June in Milton Keynes, looking at connected and automated vehicles, what we might need to do, things like traffic regulation orders. What can we learn from the likes of CAV Forth and the Oxfordshire trial, and what standards might look like that are necessary to support them. Yeah, looking to be quite an interesting day, that one. So hopefully see you at one of those. If you've forgotten how to get hold of us, then my contact details are on the screen. And if there are no other questions or comments and thoughts, I'll thank you for your time. Hope you found it useful, and have a good rest of the day. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Tim. See ya. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you for watching this RTIG webinar. To find out more about RTIG and our work, then please visit our website at rtig.org.uk. Thank you.